welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And a couple weeks ago, I had a really great chance to interview a dear friend and incredible musician, Francis Lacresto, and he was talking about a gig that he did on Halloween at a local eatery in Brooklyn, and he mentioned that he was playing with Robin McMillan, a great drummer, great cat, and then he mentioned this other cat who, it didn't ring familiar in my ears, but that's not a surprise because I'm kind of caught in my own little bubble, but I, as soon as I started to transcribe the interview, I said, I got to reach out to this cat because anybody that Francis plays with is pretty much a head cat. And so I looked this cat up and I'm like, holy cow, this is exactly what I have been looking for the last 10 years amongst my peer group at 42 years old. This is a cat who has taken State Department tours, much like Mike Mainieri did with Buddy Rich and Ernie Watts did with Oliver Nelson, going to the timeless lands of Southeast Asia in the Middle East, and he is obsessed with organic creation in the same way that the masters of this music were. He grew up in Berkeley, which is ensconced with sort of hippies or neo-hippies or people that are quite honestly skiffle players, even though there was quite a dynamic scene there at one time. But when I look at someone like my guest, I realize that I guess maybe in some ways I wish there were more of him and her in this world to produce authentic music, to be singular, and to break through the morass of mediocrity that we are awash in today. Noah Garabedian, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks a lot for having me, and thank you for those sweet words. Appreciate it.
Well, man, I got to tell you, bro, I was like, I'm going to check this cat out. And I was like reading your bio, and I mean, literally, I almost like my eyes were rolling into the back of my head because I didn't know that somebody could live a life like this. Granted, pre-COVID, but still. I mean, when did you recognize that you were a conduit for the music coming through you from the heavens?
That's a pretty heavy question, but I guess I could answer that maybe a more simplified version of that.
Go ahead, yeah, whatever comes to mind, yeah.
When did I realize that I wanted to be a musician or I enjoyed playing music? Is that kind of...
Well, more to the point, like, I mean, I've done a couple interviews with Miroslav Vitous, and he talked about when he was in Weather Report, the original version, Al Muzone, Zawinul, Shorter, and him, and he said that when you get your ego out of the way and you play, basically you allow yourself to be a conduit of information coming through you from the heavens, so you can play what I would call spiritual jazz or spiritual music. And he said that Zawinul is sometimes we would get very free, with Wayne, and Zawinul will get a little insecure and he'd want to bring it back to more form. So, you say what you want about Vitous. He was sort of basically saying Zawinul was too insecure. But the point is that, like, in order to play the music that I love and that apparently you have been doing with all these insane cats, you have to get out of the way of your ego and then allow the information to come through you. So it's not even about, like, when you wanted to be a musician, because there are plenty of cats that want to do that and they have a lot of great facility and chops. But they, it's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And so I just wonder if you can talk about a time when you recognize that this was your gift, this was your superpower, and that when you really got out of your own way, you were a conduit for the music coming through you from the heavens.
Sure. Well, that's definitely a great question. I think, for one, the example you brought up of Weather Report and Miroslav and Wayne Shorter's relationship in that band, I think that's both of those guys I feel like are 100% in the music to serve the music and to
Right.
do the music justice, play it truthfully, and be true to themselves. And I know that sounds somewhat esoteric, but it's really it's true and easier said than done. For me, something that really helped me kind of let go and embrace the unknown of music and embrace the music itself was just playing with musicians who I grew into deep friendships with, and musicians who I felt comfortable being around with, and of course playing with masters as well. You can't help but get lost in the music because they're in the music as deeply. They bring you in there.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when you.
But
yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but I'd say that playing with people who I connect with on a personal level is really important to me.
Yeah, well, because that creates trust, and I think, from your earliest days, I mean, I just transcribed this interview with Barry Melton, who was the Fish in Country Joe and the Fish, which is an iconic Berkeley band, and far from a jazz group. But what he said was, the musicians, frankly, that he wants to play with are ones who recognize that they have to sacrifice for the whole, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that on a night when everybody is in the zone, that's when magic can occur. And I think he was spot on about it, because at least my generation and younger, I mean, you've been playing with guys with huge ears, and they're serving the music, but somewhere along the line, the memo got a little bit lost about what it really means to sacrifice for the whole. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit to younger cats. I mean, I know you do a lot of mentoring and teaching, but to me, that is the essence of a band. And I wonder how you try to get that across to kids today, because a lot of cats, even before COVID, a tremendous technique, tremendous facility, but they wind up playing a lot by themselves, and they don't really have that experience on the bandstand. And as a result, when they become leaders, before they should be leaders, it turns out that they don't have that acumen. They don't have their ears are not big enough. And so I just wonder if you can talk a little bit about, I mean, you can personalize it if you believe in that theory that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that it's important to sacrifice for the greater good of the whole, because ultimately that's going to create new musical vocabulary.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that really comes to mind immediately is getting a chance to play with any of the master musicians, regardless of age, but especially the older ones, I guess. You notice right away that they are in it to make the entire band sound good, and they can make anybody sound good. And I think that you see that, especially, let's see, and maybe, for a jazz reference, I think somebody like Joe Lovano is a good example, because he has so many different bands and plays with so many different people. And, especially here in New York, he was playing a ton, and he always seemed to use a variety of bands, and everyone sounded great, and he always sounded like himself.
Wow.
But the band just rose to his level. And so I think that it's important. Oh, how's my solo going? Oh, I like that thing that I played. But really, what we should be thinking about is, how's the band sounding? How can I help my brothers and sisters in the band, rise up and make this sound better as a whole?
How have you gone about it? I mean, Lovano is steeped in, he did, I mean, he really was mentored by a lot of guys like Dr. Lonnie Smith, like just badass players. And so, I mean, can you talk about your own, especially with younger cats? I mean, you obviously are a link in the chain in the lineage of music. And I do come from the school of Duke Ellington. I mean, I believe it is all music, and then the subjective part is it's either good or bad. But, you know, like when you're working with younger cats and you show up at the gig and you don't really even know them personally that well, how do you get them to raise the level of their game? I mean, like, so that the band sounds good and that everybody is playing their ass off, but they're all, as a collective, they get it.
Well, that's certainly a situation that I've been in countless times, especially being a bass player. Yeah, being a bass player. And I guess for one, it's important for me to show up, with my ego in check. That's for sure. And even if I might be the oldest person in the band or the youngest person in the band, I'm only human, just like they are, and I'm only going to sound as good as the rest of them sound. So, for me, I guess if I show up in a situation like you're mentioning, it's important for me to just be a nice person right off the bat and, try to get to know the person in as little time as possible. And then from the jump, from downbeat, just to try to connect. I mean, I guess I would say, if I could put it in more kind of tangible terms especially for musicians, one thing I try to do is connect with the drummer right away. So, that's because if the bass player and the drummer are sounding good, then the whole band's going to have a great time.
Yes.
So, yeah, I look to connect with the drummer right away.
Now, you're talking about it like in a verbal way, right? Like you just sort of rap with them or, make them feel comfortable because they may be like sort of not in awe of you, but just, a little bit intimidated because they're getting on the bandstand. So you make them feel more comfortable. It's not like you have a lot of time to shed with them before the gig.
Or they could be incredibly disappointed that I showed up.
I dig. No, because it looked like you said Lovano had. I mean, not that Lovano. Not that you're in the backstage watching him, but he has all these bands. He sounds like himself, and the bands all sound good. And you're perceptive enough to. I'm just wondering, is it, because. The less said, the better. But then if the less said, the better, then maybe people aren't as comfortable or relaxed. So I'm just trying to get the idea of like how much nonverbal leadership goes into allowing the cats to, basically allow the music to transcend, the collective. Like basically when you put all the soul together, if you're playing with a band with a lot of life force, then the whole is definitely going to be greater than the sum of its parts. But I just wonder, like in the pre-production, if that's the right word, if, how you get, because I mean, I'm a journalist and I'm a broadcaster. So when I come to gigs and if I'm tight with the cats and I'm backstage, I love just making them laugh and getting them sort of, off on a tangent or just getting them thinking about their history, making them feel, amped up if they're in that frame of mind. But as a leader, I just wonder if, how much nonverbal leadership goes into, especially with the drummer, sort of being the antecedent to a really hot gig.
Right. Well, I suppose there are kind of two ways to answer that question. And, for starters, I mean, I never really think of myself as a leader on the bandstand. But
why I say? I mean, I'm just saying, like, I mean, I know you're a humble cat. I'm just saying, like, this pedigree is like, Thelonious Monk. John Coltrane National Jazz Scholarship, Thelonious, but these are like the heaviest names. And obviously, like, it's not just like, you're not up there like freaking going off on like 40-minute bass solos, like wanking it. I mean, obviously you got the memo. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm putting you on a pedestal, but at the same time, I also want people to recognize that people like Mac and Lacrasto and you, like, I look at you guys as the future of music. So maybe you don't look at yourself that way, but in your own mind, how do you try to, I don't know, get the whole collective off on a given night?
Sure. Well, there's, like I was saying, there's definitely like two ways to kind of answer that. And one is, yeah, there's definitely like the verbal communication. There's a lot that we can say just physically, whether it's a smile or, walking around frantically or walking around calmly, setting up, nice and relaxed, or setting up and being stressed. And people on the bandstand can feed off of that energy immediately. So if they're like, oh, Noah's stressed and he seems really high strung, like he's angry or whatever it is, like that immediately sets a vibe on the bandstand. So, and then, so it's, I don't necessarily need to connect too much verbally. I mean, I like to joke around and have a good time, of course, especially when I'm with my friends. But, when people I meet, just be cool and respectful and friendly and humble to the people you meet on the bandstand, and we're gonna have a good time. And then but there's so much that can be said musically, without really, without just like talking about it before the gig, like, oh, okay, are you gonna play in 4 on this tune, or are you gonna play in 2 on this tune? It's more like from the downbeat, like how is this drummer playing? Where is he feeling the bird sheet, feeling the beat? How can I get into that pocket without feeling like, well, okay, so if I feel like a drummer is maybe dragging, say, how can I kind of push the tempo without making the drummer feeling like I'm bullying them? You know what I mean?
I love it. Yeah,
how can I get the band to, groove super hard without looking the drummer dead in the eyes and being like, hey, you're dragging, you're rushing. And so there are little musical techniques that I think bass players and drummers can both do to push or relax a band. And then there are also, personal and physical techniques that we can do on the bandstand when we meet new musicians that we're going to play with.
Dude, you are one of the cats, man. I mean, I've had, I'll send you these interviews because you're going to be dying. But I mean, I've interviewed Reggie Workman, Steve Swallow, Chuck Israels. Chuck Israels was like playing with Pete Seeger. I think he was playing like just singing and playing guitar in 1950 on his porch, and then 9 years later he was playing with Coltrane. And these guys were like omnivores when it came to music. I wonder about growing up in Berkeley. Would you say that you were a skiffle player at first, in the sense that you were self-taught? I look at today's world, especially in the academy, and there's so much sort of, for lack of a better word, sort of a wonkiness to it. There's a lot of, it's very mental, and it's not really like guttural or in the soul, so to speak. And I just wonder about how much of a street scholar you were. I mean, were you busking on the corner of in downtown Berkeley? Like, can you talk a little bit about your street scholar versus academic pedigree?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was really fortunate to grow up when I did and where I did, because when I was coming up in Berkeley and in the Bay Area, there was still the older generation was still around. There was a lot of fantastic music being played, some clubs that are no longer there, some great local legends and masters who were there, who were ready, willing, and able to teach to anybody who was ready to listen. And so you soak up a lot of music just through osmosis, just by being around older musicians, hearing them play, of course, but also just kind of hanging around them, and you can learn a lot from people, even if they're not playing their instrument, and you just kind of sit around and listen. So I feel like I definitely was lucky in that sense to get exposed to some of that.
Well,
And
let's break it down. I mean, we're talking Mark Levine, Rob Fisher, who's around, and talk about the osmosis. I mean, who were the titans that were cooking the groove in Berkeley?
Right. Yeah. I mean, actually, that's interesting. You mentioned Rob Fisher, the bass player.
Such a great fucking dude, man. Yeah. No, I had a chance to see him at Harris's Steakhouse, I think, and I think with Pete Magadini. The dude played his ass off. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Wow.
So, and he played with Jader and those cats. But I figured, I'm like, you're cut from. I mean, that dude can play, dude.
So I actually studied with Rob Fisher. He was my first teacher.
Now that is, I see. You know, this is a divine thing. This is so freaking beautiful.
And that's interesting because not many people know about him out here. And then,
yeah.
So I studied with him for about 2 years, and then I studied with a bass player named Glenn Richman, who is originally from Philly, played in Larry Young's band for a long time.
What? I don't even know that cat. Jesus.
Yeah. I mean,
wow.
He's pretty under the radar, but he was kind of the bass player in the 80s and 90s when a lot of musicians had moved to the Bay Area. So Bobby Hutcherson, Larry Young, and Joe Henderson, those guys were living in the Bay. A pianist named Ed Kelly.
Oh my God, dude! Are you? Oh wait, dude. Wait, Ed Kelly, dude. Dude. Paul Jackson from the Headhunters. He learned all his bass lines from Ed Kelly's left hand, dude. This is back in the day. Yeah, this is back in the day. He was playing. Ed Kelly is dude. He used to play in North Beach at the Red Balloon. I mean, we're going back to the 60s. This is, dude. I can't. You're telling me that you were on the bandstand with Ed Kelly?
Well, so Ed used to host jam sessions at his house every Sunday afternoon. So I would go. I played, a little bit, but I was pretty young. I was probably like 12 or 13, and at that point I was just playing electric bass. But I would, my dad would drop me off, and
dude, this is unbelievable, dude.
Yeah, it was a pretty soulful experience.
I mean, can you remember? I mean, yeah, go. And you know what I just wanted you to talk about is with someone like Ed Kelly. Not that he, I mean, the guy could groove, but he also he was playing with Pharaoh back in the '60s. Can you talk about, if anything, what you learned about the spiritual qualities of, or the unquantifiable nature of music in general? That it's not just the notes on the page. Is there a story that you can recall from him or any of these shaman cats? Because they're so vital, they're so overlooked, and quite frankly, a lot of them aren't even here anymore. So I just wonder about the unquantifiable nature of music. To me, it's the essence of the soul.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, Jake. One guy I really want to mention, don't want to neglect before I kind of go deeper in that, is a trumpet player named Khalil Shaheed, who was in the Bay Area and ran he ran this organization called Oaktown Jazz Workshop.
Beautiful.
And he was just such an important member of the community there, so I learned a lot from him. I can't honestly recall a moment when I was that young of feeling like, oh, there's like a spiritual side of music.
No, I dig.
But like I was saying earlier, I definitely think there's an osmosis that goes on. Just being around people of that level, that age, who, they created the music, honestly.
They did.
And they were around the other creators. So, just being around them, you realize oh, there's something else going on, but I don't really understand it. And so I feel like it honestly wasn't until gotten a little older, late teens, or gone to college and started, being able to play with or just be around and hear older master musicians. But, you know, there's got to be a better way, at least for me. I'm not quite able to articulate it, but music and spirituality, I feel like it shouldn't be like, there shouldn't be a discussion where we discuss A and B. It should just be one thing. You know what I mean?
You just nailed it. I mean, I remember, I forget who I was. I don't know if he's left us now. There's this really unheralded guitar player in New York called Ted Dunbar. I don't know if that name rings a bell. He was like, I mean, you know, he was all in these prestige sessions, very mercurial, like a numerologist, and he said church is on the bandstand. And I thought that was basically right. The best way to, there's no dogma, especially if what we've been talking about here the last half hour, if all those things are aligned correctly, then it's a divine thing. And I agree with you, it shouldn't be separated. But yet there's so much information now, Noah. What do you say to cats? How it's impossible to unplug. I don't care if I guess you could cut your cable and throw your iPhone away, but how I mean, when I opened the show and I said mediocrity, I meant that if you go onto YouTube, there's so much content and so much of it is very average. And so in order to really be a detective in this time, you have to seek. How do you get your students to think for themselves so that they at least you can put them on a path towards being a shepherd and not a sheep?
Sure. Yeah, I think one thing that I noticed in a lot of my students, and you know, I don't want to say like one thing I know about young kids. You know, I don't want to.
You're not exactly you're not a graybeard. No, I dig. Yeah, totally.
But you know, I noticed that a lot of developing musicians, they don't listen to enough music, and they also don't listen to themselves. And so I really I encourage young musicians to record themselves practicing, record their gigs, and listen to as much music as possible. And that means, like, you know, kind of close listening. So whether that's checking out an entire album and just focusing on, you know, Paul Chambers and Philly Joe Jones, or it's listening back to your gig and checking out, you know, how you're comping behind the saxophone solo or something like that, like really intentional listening. And then, you know, listening to your own practice is super helpful. Even if it's, I've been filming my own practice sessions recently. I found I can see where I physically carry tension when I'm playing. I can see, you know, it opens up a whole new world. So I think that in order to break through, for a developing musician to break through the sort of mechanical or robotic side of music that is so prevalent in academia, you know, listen to as much as you can, and go into every listening session and every opportunity you have to learn, and with open ears. And, you know, when you see something that you immediately write off, you know, try to take a step back and think of something that you can learn from it. Take away a positive for every negative. You know what I'm saying?
I love that. I mean, what do you mean that they don't listen to themselves? They're just, that's because I feel like if they are not listening to, if they're kind of biased and they make judgments about music and they're not listening to enough music, then chances are they're probably just wanking it, you know, potentially listening to themselves. So you're talking about close listening and being somewhat critical of themselves, or recognizing where they need to sort of cultivate?
Well, yeah, but again, I don't really want them to be too critical, like to get down on themselves. It's more like, if we're talking about, you know, how does the audience feel, or how would the audience feel if they heard this jam session, or if this was on a recording, how would somebody feel if they listen to it while they're driving in their car.
Right.
And in turn, what can you do to make it better, but not in a negative way? What can you do to make yourself better, make the band better? What did you learn from like a positive side of things? Every learning experience should be a positive, not like not a moment for you to beat yourself up or to talk shit about talk poorly about the piano player.
We're not regulated by the FCC. Yeah, no, I dig. So
okay.
Yeah, no, you're good. But yeah, so it's more about objective, honest, and non-judgmental kind of evaluation.
Yeah, exactly. And for every negative feeling you have, try to think of a positive. Really just keep the collective in mind and think about the feeling of the music. How does it make you feel? How does it make the audience feel? And how's the drummer feeling when you're playing?
I talked to.
I hope that's clear.
Dude, listen. You have to. This is a stream of consciousness thing. So you're doing fantastic.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. No, the late drummer in Dugu, Chancellor, it was a dear friend, and he taught at USC in the latter portion of his career, and he talked about a lot of musicians coming from overseas, so jazz is now really a world language. And a lot of those cats come on scholarship, and they play, and they're very gifted, and they're amazing, but they have a tendency, like you were saying, to have not a elitist might be the wrong word, but sort of a high-end view of themselves, so they wind up jamming with themselves. And Indugu was like, I don't see them incorporating enough of like going out and playing with the cats who have rubber bands on their saxophones. Like the blues players or the street scholars more. That you wind up in this sort of that jazz has become kind of a high, especially in the academy, so to speak, a little bit too highbrow, and that he wanted cats to go and sort of experience something more along the lines of visceral anguish blues and mix amongst the people. Now, again, the club scene is so far removed from what it once was, even before you were on the scene. But when you were at UCLA, did you make it a point to go and play with, can you just talk about your view of music and whether you put yourself into folk settings and play and like how you basically put yourself out? I think that's what we're kind of talking about here, is get out of your comfort zone, push yourself out of your comfort zone, and just make whatever setting it is good. You get labeled, oh,
Totally.
he's a jazz head, but actually it's just all music. So can you talk about a specific time of when you sort of were like, I have no idea. I don't, maybe even you fell apart. But at the same time, you look back in hindsight and recognize that it was an incredible learning experience because you pushed yourself out of your comfort zone.
Totally. Absolutely, Jake. Actually, I've been talking about this very kind of idea, this very concept with two friends of mine who I'm in a band with, Caleb Curtis, who's a saxophone player here, and Vinny Speraza, who's a drummer out here. And we've been talking about, I'm feeling like I'm more interested in mistakes and like, quote, bad music than putting on a CD and being like, oh wow, like these dudes are burning and like it's perfect.
It's perfect,
polished.
Yeah. No, imperfection is perfection. Yeah, totally.
And I'd rather like hear the mistakes and like the attitude. Ornette Coleman showed up to New York with a plastic saxophone. You're talking about guys with rubber bands on their horns, and
yeah,
you listen to Charlie Rouse play with Monk, and it's like he's damn near a half step off, out of tune from the piano, and it just sounds great.
Dude, it's perfect, man.
In my own recording and compositional path to document some work and embrace the mistakes a little more than I have in the past. But
Well, don't you think also, like, even in like, regardless of whether this is like something that is kind of a new thing, it's like I feel that mistakes there's no mistakes, that in some ways mistakes are gateways to. I'm always looking for vocabulary expansion. I mean, to me, it's very humbling when you look back at the trajectory of modern music recording in this country, to know that there were 300 record labels, and then in 1980 the 6 major companies bought all the labels, and then sequencers came in, and then all of a sudden it was drum machines, and Harvey Mason's programming his own drum machine. It's like, what the hell is going on here? Like, why everyone just
right,
wanted? They're like, yo, just play straight. I remember Mike Clark telling me, he's like, the producer was like, yo, just play straight beats, man. Just don't play yourself. Just play straight beats. So, like, all of a sudden it became like quantized, mechanized, just play what the last pop FM hit was. And I just feel like there's a reason why. It also speaks to other societal things, but I just feel like mistakes are gateways to new musical vocabulary, whether people know it or not. I mean, I remember Swallow telling me that. He went in to see Ornette early on at the half note and was just distraught. Like, really left like very
right.
not happy, and then like over time he's like, oh, this is so genius. Like, it took a minute, but again.
Right.
Do you think that, as somebody who, it says part-time faculty at the new school, you work with cats, outreach program, jazz at Lincoln Center, jazz for young people. This is all like right in my wheelhouse. But can you talk as frankly as you can about if there are crises as it relates to a couple things, like a supply and demand issue where you have cats. I just remember Ernie Watts again talking about going to the Schillinger House, which was Berkeley before it was Berkeley, and like Charlie Mariano would come off the road as an already established professional. Okay, he was already working, but either the road was eating him alive, or he wanted to learn a new instrument, so he'd go to Berkeley or Schillinger House. So now the Academy is bringing in cats who are, there's no guarantee on the other side that there's going to be professional viability with a music education degree, especially if you want to be a live performer. So can you talk about the things that really, setting aside the coronavirus, which has obviously stunted everything, in your mind, what are the most important sort of Rubicons that we need to cross? Is it a lack of venues? Is it the significance of music that's changed? Like, obviously Steve Miller and Journey, they're going to get millions of dollars, but what about the cats that are trying to create new music, and are they going to have to play for the door? Has the significance of music changed in our culture? What are the most important things facing younger cats? Because that's what I've dedicated my show to, is like the ability to to extend the viability of spiritual communal music. It's absolutely essential. I don't need to tell you that, but just being somebody who works with a lot of younger cats, what do you think are I don't want to say crises, but what are the biggest issues that you see in the viability of musician as a profession today?
Ooh, now you're hitting me with the hard one.
No, we're just getting started. This is only set one, dude.
Well, first off, I want to say, if that story, what you said about Mike Clark getting told by a producer to just play straight groove or whatever.
Yeah, no. So go ahead.
If that's true, that producer should have been fired.
Dude, because Mike was. Here's the point: is that, you know what? Like, I agree. But it was like, just play what the last FM hit was. They just wanted that beat, just so they could make another hit.
Right.
It became obsessed with hits, when in fact everybody knows the hit tunes always come when you're not trying to make a hit. Anyway, it is true, and it's kind of shameful,
Yeah. No, I hear you. We've lost so many of the older, musicians older masters and creators of music, regardless of genre. We've lost so many of them. We're really kind of at the end, especially in jazz, of like just a few left of the original
Absolutely
masters of this music. So I think it's really important for everybody to not write off musicians just because of their age or their technical or physical ability, whatever that may be, because I am willing to listen and learn from any 80-year-old musician in any genre, because there is something to learn from somebody who's lived 80 years of being a musician.
Absolutely, dude.
You know, it's a tough situation we're in for all artists, but especially for music, because much like in a similar way to how science and knowledge seem to have become devalued in America and in the world, I think that music has really become devalued, a commodity that I believe that everybody should have access to all fantastic art, all beautiful art, but there's something that it's lost its value and its meaning and its impact on society. And I feel like art originally was leading society, and now it feels like art is following society. I can't necessarily place blame on streaming platforms, for instance, because I think that, of course, like Spotify robs musicians, we all know that, but musicians and artists, our inability and the industry's inability to rise above that is troublesome. And I'm not trying to place blame on the artists either, but I wish. I'm going to move on from that.
No, I want to actually, no, this is the point, is that Charlie Persip, who I interviewed, rest in peace. I mean, I interviewed him 10 years ago, and when I first started my show, and he said, man, we used to get so pissed off because they'd say, oh, you play music, play. He's like, we ain't playing, man. And the point is that when you say play, it connotates, it must be fun. It must be a musician's gift to the world. Therefore, also, as we've been talking about, the unquantifiable nature of music makes it, you can't put data behind it. So therefore, in this data-driven time, people say, well, if we can't measure it with data, it must not be worth anything. So you can play for the door,
right,
or you can pay to play, and that is awful. Now, also, I don't want to be naive here. There's no doubt that at a certain period of time, the music became a threat to societal order. I mean,
Absolutely.
And so that's they want it to be. They want music for pacification now. They don't want it to burn. They don't want people to feel, and that's why I see this here. Bassist Noah Garabedian leads a 6-piece through his funky on the new Brooklyn Jazz Underground release. Now, underground is fine. They don't. I mean, that you can be an underground burning spiritual musician, but they don't want that at the surface level. They don't want people to feel. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I hear that. There's definitely been a pacification of
Yes.
art and of society in general. I think it comes from both ends. I think a lot of that has to do with the top, the people running this country, running the world. They have completely sort of...
Absolutely.
What's the word? I don't know.
Well, no, you know what it is? Dude, let me just put it like this. I mean,
power.
Michael Shreve, who's, Santana's original drummer, he's a dear friend. We've done a bunch of interviews. Dude, Pacific Gas and Oil put out the greatest record series in the early 70s. They did wind instruments, brass, percussion. These are the headiest albums. I'll send you the links to that. They're so freaking awesome. Like, they incorporate funk drumming, and then there's this whole side with Denny Zeitlin, and then there's this one with Francisco Aguabea. And the point is, it was sponsored by an oil company. Okay, like the point is that the recognition of the genius and the recognition that these people are working, that they're really legitimate, that it's real work. You know, all these cats that live in this bubble, they certainly do not want people to think for themselves. And I just think that, like, at the core, spiritual music, no matter what genre, not only is healing, but it also, for the patrons, I mean, Art Blakey used to say, he's like, my job is to wash away the dust of everyday life for all the cats that come in after a long day of work. And so, you know, there's a lot of factors. I mean, the middle class used to drive a lot of jazz music. There is no middle class anymore. You know, and we're talking about people that would work in the mill, in the factories, in the mills. I mean, very bucolic, hardcore jobs. They could come, they could appreciate the blues. Something could be said as well for the fact that the music became incredibly esoteric, and as Alan Schwartzberg told me, jazz music became an inside joke for jazz musicians. So there's a whole, like, this whole confluence of things, but the powers that be have consolidated, that's the word, they've consolidated all of the power, and you don't have a chance to have any kind of longevity. You get one chance. You get a one-hit wonder. I'm talking at the pop level. And there's just such a lack of authenticity as well. I mean, you talk about Charlie Rouse and, you know, all these other cats. I mean, you listen to those records, they might flub a note or something, but you couldn't say it wasn't authentic. And now today you listen to music, not necessarily melodic improvisation, but you listen to music, and those cats that are playing the music or singing, they couldn't even go on tour. They can't even play music, actually. It's all fixed by technology. You know, it's like that's brainwashing, you know. So it's like, to me, I mean, you're like in this amazing, that's why I came in with that intro, because I'm not like blowing smoke. Like, I am amazed. Like, it's beautiful to find someone like yourself who has a chance to do your part to make people feel like they can be themselves on the bandstand. You know, how you turn that into a living, I don't know.
Right. Well, you know, I definitely, I don't want to come off as somebody who hates contemporary music. I listen to a ton of pop music and a ton of all types of music from all centuries, and all over the globe. But,
that's great. No, I love that. Yeah, no doubt.
There is something about a lot of contemporary music where I think that it's being created to not make you think or feel, not make the listener think or feel anything, and, you know, not to disrupt their comfort zone in a sense. And I think that a lot of what makes the greatest music so great is that it made people feel a certain way. It made you think about your life, think about your society, your culture, maybe reevaluate your society and your
Absolutely.
culture. And, you know, think a little more than just like, this song makes me feel cool. It's like, well, you know, did James Brown music, when you listen to James Brown's music, okay, it might make you feel cool, but what is he talking about?
Exactly.
And also, like, that groove was born out of more than just Clyde Stubblefield. It was born out of struggle, anger, pride, joy, love, sadness, you know. So I would like to see, again, like what I was saying about what I try to get my younger students and all developing musicians to do, I'd like to see people create music that evokes more feelings from the listener, or evokes uncomfortability from the listener.
That's right. The music
you
is
know,
not intended. The music, I mean, it's like a meditation. Like, some people talk, I don't really do a lot of sedentary meditation. I'm more like throwing on early 70s Cal Tjader records and playing my conga drum. That's meditation for me. But, you know, for people that are like, like some people say that like meditation, if your meditation has angst and discomfort, that doesn't mean it's bad. It means you just have to sit with that uncomfortability and actually look in the mirror, and also like learn to push yourself out of your comfort zone. I'm not a musician. I listen back to my interviews from when I started, and I'm like, like so squeamish, and I don't have my voice. But then, it's like Richard Davis, Jack DeJohnette, all these guys, like, they let me stumble through, and they helped me find my voice. And it was like the recognition of the elders, the appreciation for all music, and I also think that like the visceral understanding of like, feeling, like you have to feel. And let's face it, I mean, my daughters and younger generations, I mean, they're more intimate with technology than they are with maybe other human beings. And that's another issue. Like, I mean, people, if you can't detect, you've had digital beats crunched into your ears for the last 20 years. If you can't detect authentic rhythm, when I interviewed Bill Cosby before the world caved in on him, we did 2 separate interviews about his involvement in music. And, he's talking about he would have people put a blindfold on him, and then they'd put on Blue Note records, and he could tell if it was Pete LaRocca or Mickey Roker or Tony Williams or it's like everybody had their own individual sound. And that's the thing, is like, maybe that's really what I've been trying to ask you for the last hour, is that especially as it relates to this American art form known as jazz, I listen to jazz today, and I hear a homogenization of sound. And so I wonder how you went about developing your own sound. I mean, you beg, borrow, and steal from your idols and peers, and then you have your own voice. And just, can you take us through how you got to that point, and how you continue on that journey?
Well, first off, I completely agree with you, Jake. I do hear, and I am seeing a homogenization of the sound, and as well as the culture around, as you said, jazz, around jazz. And I think that because jazz is becoming something that only certain people might have access to, because it's not in public school systems, it's not in communities, lower income communities, mostly communities of color anymore. It's becoming something that only people who have access to music programs and an instrument and after school lessons, and then going on to pay full tuition at a conservatory somewhere.
Yep. Exactly.
That's what's happening. And I think it's finding one's voice in any art form. I have no idea how to do that. I'm still trying to find my own voice.
Right.
But not being afraid to sound bad is so important. Like what you're saying about how you were stumbling around trying to find your own voice, and it's scary being an artist. It's scary playing with other musicians. It's scary having people listen to you and watch you, but that's how you get better.
And that's true, man. I mean, and what's so cool? You're making a great point, because you're right. These icons who are, there's only Roy Haynes. There's some left, but they're all getting up there in age.
Jimmy Cobb.
Rest in peace. You passed away, you know that.
Oh, that's right. Oh,
yeah, no, whatever. Jimmy Cobb was there, but like Tom Coster, who was in Santana, like he was a jazz head. Like he was playing the organo at a strip club in San Francisco with the Montgomery brothers, and then he'd be playing like this like dawn session in Oakland. He remembers like one day showing up. He was playing the B3, and he's playing Well You Needn't, and he looks up, and Thelonious is sitting right in front of him. It's like that is pet. But that will grow hair on your chest, on the like you will walk out of there. It's just at the end of the day, Um, I just want to believe that, we've become so. That's what Persip said too. Rest in peace. He said, we have no culture. We've become one big civilization. And when that happens, you lose, those ethnic folkways records that you probably love, and Explorer series records. You listen back, that's culture. That's unique rhythm, sound, voice. And now it's like if you scratch the culture and we become this homogenized civilization, then you get a very sterile, singular, not singular, but just basic sound across the board. And that was my question: is that how did you learn to hear music? Did you learn to play music by ear before you learned to sight read?
No, I started playing piano, and then I went to electric bass, so I could read actually pretty good because I was playing classical piano. So I can read treble and bass clef pretty well. But then, so my thing was kind of, I had to learn how to hear because I was not coming out of a tradition, where I learned by ear. I didn't play in church, for instance, growing up. So, but fortunately, being around older musicians and having them be like, oh no, you can't look at that real book. You can't.
I love it.
You can't do
I
that.
love that, dude. That is so important, man.
Goes.
Can you who said that to
Yeah.
you? Just like Fisher or those cats? Who said do not look at the book? Because that's Gary Bartz told me. He goes, younger cats, their ears are locked because they have learned to read. I mean, they've learned to read music before they learn to hear it, and they don't have the apprenticeship that once existed, where someone like Art Blakey be saying, take the fucking book off, throw the book away.
Yeah, actually, I remember there was a drummer named Eddie Marshall. I don't know who.
Dude, are you freaking kidding? He's my favorite drummer of all. Dude, by the way, I just want to tell you, he's my favorite drummer of all time. Okay.
Oh. Okay.
And are you hip to the record, The Fourth Way, that band?
No, I'm not. Actually.
Oh my God, I'm gonna say, dude, The Fourth Way was before Weather Report. David Garibaldi, they were the first band, and it was Michael White on fiddle, violin, Mike Knock on Fender Rhodes piano, Ron McClure on electric and upright, Eddie Marshall on drums. Eddie Marshall was able to keep time on the entire kit. He was the big painting on the thing. It's the nastiest fusion. It's like the first. I don't want to say first fusion music, but it was they were a precursor. Anyway, I'll send you some of their tracks.
Wow.
It's freaking nasty.
Please send me a link to that.
I will. No, Eddie Marshall he's been a spirit on this journey along with Dewey Redman and Wes Montgomery and all these freaking cats. But Eddie and Bobby Hutcherson, they used to play a lot together.
Oh yeah. Man, I'm a huge Ron McClure fan also.
Dude, Ron McClure has his work with Blood, Sweat, and Tears after David Clayton Thomas, Larry Willis, the early 70s, the funkiest bass I've ever, I'm obsessed with him. Dude, the sickest band, The Fourth Way. I'll send you that stuff. But Eddie Marshall is a perfect example of somebody who's like, he doesn't play by the book. There is no book.
Right. Yeah, so I have a pretty distinct memory of being, it must have been at the jazz school in downtown Berkeley, and I was probably in the top middle school combo or something, so I thought I was hot shit. And, Eddie's playing drums, and we're calling tunes, and I didn't know anything about jazz. I was probably just starting out on double bass, taking a couple lessons from Rob, and he wanted to play a tune, and I didn't know it, so I reached for my real book in the backpack. And he's like, no. He's like, here's how it goes.
Oh, I love it, dude. I love it.
And he sat at the piano and played it, and of course I had no ears also, so I was looking at his left hand the whole time. He's playing chords in root position so I can follow the bass. And, I sounded terrible, and that's...
that was the story. That's the story I was looking for. That was the most beautiful story. Because at that point you walked out of there and said, I don't know anything, but yet I'm so inspired to try to push myself.
Last like 15 minutes, and I kind of want to mention it. I'm not sure which question exactly it relates to, but I think that it's related to our conversation.
Of course, yeah.
An album that had a huge impact on me actually was a John Lee Hooker album called "That's My Story."
Oh, and who's on that? Who's on that?
Well, so it's a Riverside record from 1960, and it's John Lee Hooker with Sam Jones and Louis Hayes.
Yes, dude. I know, because I interviewed Louis, and we talked about that album. That is the sickest album, dude.
It's great, and it's like, so I remember discovering it, and, 10 years ago, probably, or longer than 12 years ago, I don't know. And I listened to it, I'm like, all right, like, this sounds pretty boring, and like I imagine Sam Jones. Man, is it Louis Hayes or Connie Kay? I'm gonna look
it's Louis. We talked about Lou. I'll send you that interview. We talked about that whole album. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm like, are these guys having fun? And I'm thinking about like Sam Jones just getting off a gig with, I don't know, Cedar Walls.
Right.
And then having to play like, half the tunes on the record, they're not even like 12-bar blueses. They're just kind of like jam and D while John Lee Hooker is like telling a story, And but then the more I grew into it, the more I listened, I'm like, this is heavy. Like, first off, it's a Riverside album, so who knows how Warren Keepnews or whoever got these cats on the gig is like. John Lee Hooker had to cut an album and had a contract with them, and he needed a band, and so maybe the producer put the band together, and maybe John put the band together. I don't know, but those guys probably went into the studio completely open and humble, the same way I want everybody to be when they go into a musical situation, ready to learn, ready to listen. And,
it's so true. I mean, also, Kenny Burrell, when I interviewed, he said, he goes, we grew up right alongside. The blues and the jazz are right alongside each other. John Lee was always there.
Right.
So that's the other part of it. It's pacification, and I also hear classicalization of jazz, not the blues. It's farther away from the blues, and, because so many of these guys were living that life. I mean, they might have known the American Songbook, but they were living that, Albert Ayler, Archie Shepp, they were blowing their life. That's what they were doing. So
absolutely.
It's hard to play the blues authentically when you've grown up in suburbia or completely well off. You just can't comp that. I think that Eddie Marshall story is so. First of all, Eddie was playing with. And a lot of people don't even know this, but he was playing with Toshiko Akiyoshi and Ron McClure in Hartford back in the 50s, before he even came out there.
Wow.
But I just feel like so much of, I don't know, man. I feel like in some ways, in my mind, one of the seeds or rebirths of music is going to be coming out of the coronavirus. I feel like...
Yes.
There's people that are, and I'm talking across the board, the vibration is so low. I went to see my buddy Oliver play Great Cat here in Tucson, his quartet. It's more just punk rock. It's great. But I was, it wasn't a huge crowd or anything, and we were all socially distanced, but man, the PTSD is intense, man. We've all been traumatized, whether we know it or not. And the vibration is really low, but I do feel there's an amazingly indigenous, organic opportunity for the Garabedians and the McMillans and the Crastos to really cook coming out of this thing, man. I hope that I'm right about that. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I'm hopeful. I'm not necessarily. I don't know where I stand on my hopefulness of the financial viability.
No, obviously that's going to be an issue, yeah.
But I am completely hopeful for the future of art. I think that of music in particular, I think there's going to be a lot of great stuff coming in the near future. A lot of fantastic musicians. a lot of great composing and honest composing and playing. And I think people more humanity side of things, you know, a little humbled, a little more tolerant, and a little more willing to learn, you know, and I think that'll come out through the music for sure.
Well, you know, Noah, let's do set 2 in the new year, sometime in the next couple of months. We got more to do, and I got to say, I mean, I am. I wish I could have been at that Hunky Dory gig, man. I would have been dancing till the dawn came home, dude.
Oh, it was a blast.
Yeah,
I was wearing it was Halloween night, and I was wearing a giant shark costume. It was great.
I mean, that's the point, is that ultimately my whole goal with my guests is, is that you had fun. And I think that that's part of music too. Like, it's about having fun and basically taking what you do seriously, but not taking yourself that seriously. And I think that that's the most important thing is make the music fun. Whether you're playing with masters or skiffle players, find a way to get off and find a way that, raise the collective consciousness with the audience. I think that those are vital things. And I do feel that our generation and younger, hopefully, can bring some of that back. So I look forward to doing this again, man. It was great to hang.
Thank you so much for having me, Jake. It was really cool to talk to you. I appreciate it.
And dude,
great conversation.
And if you're, check out those books. Especially, I mean, if you can hit anybody in the, I'd love to get these books into the university system, just because I think that what we've just been talking about, it's not me talking. It's excerpts from interviews just like this with all these amazing cats, some of whom have already left, but it's essential soul food for younger cats. So it's just an honor to connect with you, man. So, and keep it going.
I will definitely check out those books, and it was great to talk to you, Jake. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, much love, Noah. Happy holidays, man. Be safe.
Thank you. You too.
Be cool.
All right.
Bye. Always invigorating to talk to truly an authentic musician and a cat who is inspiring on the bandstand as much as he can in these days. It's pretty remarkable, actually, that in reality, a lot of cats have not even had the opportunity to play maybe 1, 2, 3 gigs at most this year. But we can hope for the future, and we can hope for sustainability, and that's all we can hope for. Thanks to Noah Garabedian, and we'll be back full week here on the Jake Feinberg Show as we move through Hanukkah. Hope all is well. Until next time, peace.